Afternoon, everyone. It's Wednesday, April 23rd, 2014, and this is our 7th EPIP webinar of the year. Serve on a board, save the world, and advance your career. I'm your EPIP host for the afternoon, Michael Barham, and our speakers today are actually in the EPIP studio, Dan Blakemore and Emily Kessler. So we're going to get started and pass it over to them shortly, but before we do, a quick reminder about who we are. Emerging Practitioners in Philanthropy is a national network of foundation professionals and social entrepreneurs who strive for excellence in the practice of philanthropy. Our mission is to develop emerging leaders committed to building a just, equitable, and sustainable society. A couple of announcements. Many of you hopefully have already heard of the 2014 National Conference. It's the Unity Summit. We're partnering with the Joint Affinity Groups, and it's taking place in Washington, D.C. from June 5th to 8th. The program schedule has actually just recently been released, so you can take a look at everything that's available. There are going to be some really exciting plenaries and breakout sessions. I suggest checking that out. Registration is still open, so please check out the EPIP website for more information. We also have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks, Civic Engagement in an Election Year. We're going to be hearing from some election law experts and Youth Engagement Fund, and that'll be taking place on Wednesday, May 7th, also at 3 p.m. Eastern, our standard time. So look out for more information on that, and as always, check out our website, epip.org/events, for more information on national events and local events near you. If you are not an EPIP member, you should consider joining. We have a great slate of national events, as you've seen, and some webinars coming up that are really exciting. So take a look on the website. Email me. You see my email right here, michael@epip.org. I'm happy to discuss with you some more information about membership. Okay, close to getting started. Just a couple of other items for housekeeping. We're keeping all attendees on mute. If you do have a question, please use the question box. If you're having a technical difficulty, similarly use the question box, and we'll be keeping a lookout for any issues. If you're calling in on the phone, please be sure to mute your computer to avoid the echo. And we'll be reserving some time for Q&A. We'll also try to answer questions throughout. So again, just type in questions through the question box. And lastly, we are recording this webinar. So if for any reason you have to hop off early, we are going to be sure to make that available on the EPIP website under our webinar program. So without further ado, I am going to toss it over to Emily and Dan. So just give us a moment while I make that transition.
Thanks, Michael. I hope everyone can hear us. So today we're talking about how to serve on a board, save the world, and advance your career. It's sort of the hows and whys of board service. And I have my good friend Dan Blakemore here next to me, who is an expert in this area and has graciously accepted our invitation to talk about this topic today. So we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves before we jump into some of this stuff. So Dan, please introduce yourself to our EPIP members and YNPN members.
Hello there, everybody. I'm Dan Blakemore. I am the Assistant Director of Development for Individual Giving at International House, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the YNPN National Board. So I've been in fundraising for about 7 years now, and this is finishing my 2nd year on the YNPN National Board.
Thanks, Dan. So a lot of you folks out there have heard my name and my voice before. I am working as an independent consultant right now with EPIP, but I've been an EPIP member for many years and spent much of my career in philanthropy, having served as the head of a family foundation for about 15 years. but I'm also a board member of the New York City Venture Philanthropy Fund, which is the giving circle. And we support socially innovative projects here in New York. And it's been a real pleasure and joy to be involved in that organization. So we'd also like to hear from you. We'd like to find out a little bit about your background right now. So please take a moment to participate in this poll. We don't have every choice here listed, but we're hoping that some of these cover your area in your careers. So we're just going to wait another second to allow for other folks to vote, and we're going to close the poll. And wow, it looks like we're sort of evenly spread across grant-making organizations and nonprofits. That's really fantastic. Thank you for participating in this poll. Second question, we'd like to find out if you've ever considered serving on a nonprofit board or if you already serve. So please take a moment and let us know. So this is really fantastic. So a lot of you have thought about serving on a board. So so we're happy to see those results there. That's great. So moving along, we're going to talk a little bit about why it's important to serve. So I'm going to hand it over to Dan.
Well, yes. I mean, hopefully everyone here has already had some experience at any level with nonprofit organizations. Obviously, those of you who are working at them, also people who are working at organizations that support the work of the nonprofit sector, financially and otherwise. Thank you, obviously. But nonprofits really do need your support. They really do need guidance and a lot of diverse perspectives. To jump ahead to the wonderful photo Emily found in the slide, really, we do really think that boards need as much diverse thought as possible, and that yes, and hopefully gone are most of the days when boards really did just look like a group of old white guys. But once again, we love old white guys. I'm a fundraiser.
We love everybody.
Everybody writes checks, so as a fundraiser, I have to make sure we're clear about that. But really, especially as professionals in our fields, you really have skills and talents to offer now, so you really should be considering how you can be getting involved in a board.
Exactly, and it's important to remember that it's the board who makes a lot of these critical decisions about where an organization goes. So having those diverse voices at the table is really, really important. So it's also, board service also can help develop aspects of your career that you may not be able to develop in your day job. So Dan, please elaborate on this for us.
Well, sure. I mean, one way, obviously, it should expand your own network, whether you're end up on the board of an organization you're already affiliated with, or one that is reasonably newer to you. The members of the board, just by virtue of their own experiences, should help diversify your own personal network. I mean, in my own experience on the YNPN National Board, I mean, now 2 years in, I have connections, whether they're funders, they're fellow fundraisers, people throughout the nonprofit sector, really now spread across the country. And it's really great to have kind of these people to be able to appeal to when I have some burning question about something either in my own work or even YNPN or other things. But it can also raise your professional profile, whether it's in your own organization where you're currently working, but also ideally within our entire sector. It's really important to have leaders who are doing this hard work of board service, being able to learn from each other, but also share really everything you're gaining through this experience as you continue hopefully serving on boards throughout your career. And then finally, definitely will strengthen your skills. For me, as Emily mentioned, a lot of things that I've been doing on the YNPN National Board are things, so still with a lot of a fundraising shift, um, but are definitely things I've not been doing in my own day job, whether it's doing a lot kind of one-on-one and even group fundraising coaching with members of our board to get people more comfortable with the concept of fundraising, make sure they are understanding how hopefully easy it is to share their own passion for the work with their own networks to then encourage them to support the organization that they're affiliated with. So there's some things, more things for you to think about.
So, Dan, can you elaborate maybe on a particular skill you may have developed through your board work that you probably didn't develop in your day job? I'm thinking of one in particular that I have. So,
Sure, sure.
tell us your story and then I'll share mine.
Share your own. Okay, that's great. As I was alluding to, when I joined the board, the summer of 2012, it was really kind of my focus as the person coming on new to the board who was a professional fundraiser to kind of help assess the skills of the board in fundraising, but also help expand that capacity based on where everybody was comfortable, but also kind of keep pushing everybody along. So at our first board retreat in 2013, we did a very simple exercise. So we just kind of have everybody stand up and pick which side of the spectrum they're going to be on, whether it's, oh, I couldn't ask my mother for $5, all the way to I'll ask anybody for anything for any reason that is hopefully legal. And it was interesting just to see, obviously, that the vast majority of people kind of fell somewhere in the middle. There were some people who, especially there are a couple people on our board who've been executive directors or in leadership of nonprofits and get it and have had the experience already. But also there was one specific member I'm thinking of who was all the way on the other side of the, I wouldn't ask anybody I know for money if you paid me. Um, and it was really interesting to be able to provide kind of throughout the year, but especially at that retreat, start working with people to say, okay, we want you to share at its most basic level. Okay, why are you involved with this organization? Why do you think our mission is important? And to let them see that fundraising really was just sharing that same passion for the work that we were doing. And it ended up that the board member who was all the way on the far end ended up bringing in, I think she ended up being in the top 5 board members as far as their fundraising for 2013. So I definitely am taking some of the credit as a personal success for me. But overall, we were really able to triple the amount that the board previously would raise. So 2013 was definitely a banner year for us in that area. And as I said, we probably take a little bit of credit for that. But I want to hear Emily's exciting story of skill building.
So when I first came to be involved with the New York City Venture Philanthropy Fund, we have this project management committee, which is the capacity building arm of the organization. So what we normally do is every year we give out a cash grant, but we also provide pro bono technical assistance to our grantee. So we have this project management committee that handles that aspect. And I had just signed up for that committee. I really didn't know anything about it. And the leader of the organization was transitioning out of her role as a leader and founder. And I was on a call with her and some other folks, and she said, she asked out into the universe, can someone take the responsibility of setting up the next call? And there were crickets. I mean, nobody was talking. And so, of course, I, raised my hand in my living room where I was having the call. And I said, sure, I'll arrange the next call. And then lo and behold, I all of a sudden became the head of the committee, unbeknownst to me. So I was basically handed this job by default and didn't know anything about project management. And fortunately had a wonderful co-chair who had done some of this work beforehand and held me by the hand and led me through it. But basically what happens sometimes is that you're asked to take on a role. You have no experience doing it, and you learn as you go. And now I'd like to think I'm a pro at project management. I'm sure some other people might disagree, but in any case, this is one skill I never would have developed in any other capacity. So it was um, really fantastic. So it looks like we've got some questions coming up, and we have time at the end for questions. So if that's okay, we'll take a look at these at the end of the presentation. But as you're thinking of these questions, type them out, keep them coming, because we definitely will address them at the towards the end of our presentation. So before you serve, you're gonna want to take some inventory of your key strengths and skills, and you want to have a discussion with yourself about what you can offer an organization. I found this website called Via Me. It's V as in Victor, IAM as in Mary, E.org, and they can help. That's one of many sites that can help you fill out a strengths profile so you can really see what it is that you have to offer organizations. You're also going to want to think about the types of organizations with which you're going to want to be affiliated. Which issues or causes do you care about the most? And finally, determine how much time you have to offer and how much financial support you can offer an organization or potentially raise from outside resources. So knowing your available time is really critical here. So we have a quick question about the website. I'm going to type it here in the chat box so everybody can see it. And when we do a recap of this on the EPIP blog, we'll make sure to highlight that for you guys. So, so this is the part of our presentation that's the real meat, because we're gonna talk about some roles and responsibilities of board members, and hopefully dispel some of the myths that are floating out there. I'm gonna let Dan take over the first couple. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Okay, sure. Obviously, there are many roles and responsibilities that you have by virtue of joining a nonprofit board, but we try to focus on some of the kind of higher level ones that everyone is going to face. Mission and planning. I mean, obviously, the board is primarily responsible for assuring that the organization pursues its mission and really is thinking as strategically as possible in the long term for the organization. Not just the short term kind of, what programs are we doing, but also you have to be thinking about long-term sustainability, really where is the organization going, and is that going to be something that can be sustained ideally into perpetuity, or until you alleviate whatever issue you are working on. Oversight really comes in whenever you have staff. And, for example, when I'm with the YNPN National Board, we now have count them two, full-time staff members. We just had the second person join in the last month, so it's still very exciting for us. And it really comes down to accountability. I mean, your executive director or president really, for one, should be comfortable really having frank and honest conversations with the members of the board. But the board should also be clear enough on their role to understand that sometimes there are going to be difficult conversations, or trying to figure out, okay, well, we set these goals for the next 3 years. We're in the middle of this period, and it seems like we may be off a little bit. What can we do? What support can the board provide to the staff to make sure that you get back on track to be able to meet these goals that we all wanted to reach? Resources. I would say that definitely comes into the world of fundraising. As I mentioned before, obviously boards in I feel like what everyone has in mind is everyone on a board can give. It's full of billionaires and billionaires who write $100,000 checks every time the board meets, and I can tell you for sure that is by far not the case. Do not let what you see in some of the Chronicle of Philanthropy articles about some of the huge organizations fool you. Uh, the bulk of the nonprofit sector really does consist of smaller organizations, small to medium size, um, with budgets that are definitely not in the hundreds of millions of dollar ranges. But as a board member, you obviously do have a responsibility, fiduciary duty, in fact, for the sustainability and financial health of your organization. And part of that definitely comes into with fundraising. There's a key concept that everyone I want to make sure you understand: give, get. And it's kind of every board does not do this. However, they probably should to be transparent, if nothing else. What's the annual responsibility of a board member? How much money do you need to either bring in to give, bring it in to get, or give personally to the organization? So some organizations, it could be, oh, we want you to give $1,000 a year either to the annual fund or the special event, but we'd love it if you could bring in an additional $5,000 in one of those lines. But that's definitely something you need to be clear about before you commit to being on a board, because you don't want to join a board that is an organization you love and then find out your second month that, oh well, yeah, every board member gives or brings in $150,000, unless that is something that would be a very easy climb for you. And if so, call me. I want you on my board. Um, but the other key role or responsibility is definitely outreach, and whether that's kind of opening your own network to the organization as needs come up, but it also can be about really representing your organization. I mean, this year, the YNPN National Board, one of our strategic priorities is creating space for visionary leadership. And the bulk of that is really to create space for our executive director to have more space to really start doing much more strategic management of the organization, and us as a board stepping up into some of those activities she's been doing kind of around the country, whether it's being invited to speak, serving on panels, being in direct contact with partners, just to take some of that stuff off of her plate so she has more time to really focus more strategically on what the organization needs going forward. But I'll turn it back to Emily for some of the other requirements.
Yeah, actually, before I jump into that, I want to go back to resources because, Dan, you brought up something that I think is really critical for us to just put out there. Back in the days when I was a grant maker, when I was reviewing applications for support, I wanted to see 100% board participation for all the nonprofits that we were looking at, because if a nonprofit, I mean, 100%, yeah. If the board isn't supporting the organization, then why should we? So so I'm not saying that to scare anybody, but just, and I think the fundraising piece has always been a little bit of a tricky area for folks who want to serve on a board but are either afraid to ask for money or feel like they don't have the financial resources to participate. But all of that you can be trained in those areas, you can make up in other areas. Fundraising is really about relationship building. So and a good board will provide you as a member with the support you need in order to raise the resources that they're looking for. But it is really important to just participate in fundraising as a member, because you showing that you support your organization sends a huge message to potential grant makers. So other requirements listed here are, so with regard to meetings, an organization, a nonprofit will either have annual, quarterly, or monthly meetings, and it's really important to be there, especially if there's only an annual meeting. So you really want to show up for those meetings and participate. You may also be asked to serve on a committee. So some boards, well, we also didn't talk about, and we can talk about this briefly. Some nonprofits are so small with their staff that their boards are actually doing a lot of the work. So so it could be that serving on a committee helps the organization actually fulfill its mission. So there may be committees that you might be asked to serve on: an executive committee, a governance committee, a finance committee, a development committee. I mean, there are various different types of committees depending upon the industry that you're in. Strategic planning is another one. And then finally, this word duties is really important because it sort of sums up the values involved in serving on a board, right? So there's the duty of care, which means that you should be reasonably well informed, you should participate in decisions of the board, and you should act in good faith and be prudent. There's also the duty of loyalty, which demands that board members act in the best interests of the organization. So for me, what this means is that you really shouldn't be sitting on more than one board at a time, because if you're not 100% loyal to that organization, they're really missing out by not having that from you. So, and then board members should either avoid conflicts of interest or at least make them known to other board members. And the final duty is the duty of obedience, which requires that board members act in compliance with mission and bylaws and fulfill legal responsibilities. So, the ultimate question, now that you know how to be a board member and what's involved, how do you go about finding a board that you could possibly volunteer with?
I mean, there are a lot of different ways to be doing this, and most of these are hopefully things you've already thought of, but you should be reaching out directly. I mean, if there are specific organizations that you think, oh, I would really love to either sit on their board or to get more deeply involved, and if that led to board service, that would be great too. Make sure you're talking to people. Either make sure you've had a conversation with the organization's executive director, perhaps even a member of the board, if they could even refer you to someone who sits either on some version of either the nominating committee or the governance committee that is charged with identifying prospective board members, kind of vetting them, meeting them, making sure that they are not mass murderers, and are willing to meet the requirements that are set for board members. That's one great way to be doing it. You could also be asking your network. There's a really interesting piece I saw a while ago on a venture capitalist and entrepreneur named Heidi Roizen, and she was really focused like a laser on getting at least one, ideally a few, seats on corporate boards here in the U.S. And she sat down and wrote out emails, notes to more than 100 people in her own network to make sure that they knew this was something she was interested in, because your network, unfortunately, unless they are close personal friends with people like Miss Cleo or still subscribe to the hopefully defunct Dionne Warwick Psychic Friends Network, right. It's likely that they will not know that you're looking for a nonprofit board seat unless you share that with them. So then as opportunities come their way, or that they're made aware of things, they can say, okay, that Emily Kessler, okay, yes, I know she wants a nonprofit board seat. Let me see if this thing is of interest to her. You should also be searching online. As you see on the slide, there are idealist lists these things. LinkedIn is a really big opportunity. Only in the last few months, they made it so you can edit your profile to indicate that you are interested in nonprofit board service. And they're really making their tools more available to nonprofit organizations to identify people like you all who are here with us on the webinar, who are truly interested in nonprofit board service. And there are also things like Volunteer Match, BoardNet USA, which is through, I believe, Board Source, and BCG Governance Matters. And then I know Emily even participated in the program done by the United Way of New York City, It really provides active training on what it really means to be a board member, and then also will pair you with organizations that are seeking people like you. But then the other point would be to make sure you are open to alternatives. People of our age and stage may not be the perfect fit right now, but there are so many organizations that have what they are calling junior boards, committees, something in that realm, which are really being used as kind of feeder pipelines to kind of identify and cultivate future board members. Be sure that they have the skills that they're interested in, have the commitment to the mission and the work that's actually happening. So I'd say keep your eyes open kind of to all, kind of pursue each of those as kind of tactics for your overall strategy of getting yourself onto a nonprofit board.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone saw this op-ed piece in the Times on Sunday. It was Aaron Hurst who, did you see that, by the way, Dan? So Aaron's written a book called, I think it's called The Purpose Economy. And he talked a little bit in his op-ed piece about how there are way more volunteers out there than actual positions available, which and then it takes actually a lot of effort for a nonprofit organization to run a volunteer program. And all of which is true, but what I found in a lot of the capacity building work I've done with nonprofits is that they may have a board, but they don't have a good functioning board. They need board members who are well trained and know what they're supposed to be doing and dedicated. So although it may seem like there may not be as many openings out there, there really are. And you really have to dig deep to uncover them. And if you find an organization that's really exciting to you, present yourself as someone who knows what you're doing. Take part in one of these training programs, like the one I did at the United Way, and I can talk about that briefly in a minute. And you'll likely find that that other person can easily be replaced because they don't really know what they're doing. So if you're dedicated and you know how to act as a board member, there is a place for you. I guess that's my point. So, but yes, so I did participate in the United Way New York City Board Serve program. They what they do is a full day training. There's a $99 contribution that they require, and at the end of the training, they match you with an organization. So, so I loved it. I was already a board member when I took the training, so I didn't take part in the matchmaking part, but it was fantastic. And if anyone wants more information, feel free to contact me after this webinar. I'm happy to provide it. So I definitely recommend them. So by the way, did we talk about how? Dan? Did you get a chance to talk about how you came to the YNPN board? What was that path for you?
It was definitely not intentional. I feel like I get to blame social media and my wonderful wife for a lot of things. But social media definitely brought me and YNPN together. I actually ended up on a tweet chat, I feel like in 2011 or 12, with Rosetta Thurman and Allison Jones, who if you're on Twitter, you should be following them because they're wonderful, first of all. And I think Rosetta or Allison said something about how I'm a guru when it comes to LinkedIn, which is absolute vast hyperbole, trust me. And the national director, Trish Choom, for YNPN, reached out to me saying, "Oh, LinkedIn, I just don't know. I'd love to talk to you and get your thoughts." Okay, so like, oh, and you're a fundraiser. I got fundraising to do. We can always talk about that. You're in New York. I'm in New York. Sure. I ended up acting as kind of a de facto accountability buddy around fundraising for, I'd say, about 9 months. And then we were getting through making some good progress, I think. And finally she said, "Well, you can keep me really accountable if you join our national board." I said, "Well, okay, what do I have to do?" "Oh, no, So we really need to expand our capacity around fundraising. It's really about supporting the future of the nonprofit sector leadership, which sold me right away. So yeah, for me, it was, I really had no goal of getting on a board by a certain year, certain age, or anything. It really just worked out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty much what happened with me too. I was not seeking a position on a board, but I was involved with the Giving Circle and they were going through a leadership transition. And I just felt very strongly about making sure that the organization moved forward. And so I offered to take on little bits and pieces, and that's kind of how it happened. So it was sort of an organic process as well for me. But that's also a lot of times how we find our jobs, and
Yes.
you know, it's many times you're just living your life and then all of a sudden you find yourself on the board of some organization.
Yes.
So I know we ran through a lot of information really quickly, and this only is the highlights of
Yes,
board service.
yes.
I mean, there are wonderful books and resources out there that we can get to in a minute, and Dan and I are available after this webinar, and we'll get to some questions too. But this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg. So, but we wanted to find out if well, a lot of you had already indicated that you were interested in serving on a board. So we just wanted to check in after chatting with you here to see if you're more likely, less likely, about the same. We're gonna keep the poll open a little bit longer and wait for some of those votes to come in. And all right, we'll go ahead and close the poll. And that's great. This is really helpful. I hope we've been helpful. And we're just going to share some resources. These slides will be available after the webinar. We'll put them up on the EPIP blog. And these are just a couple of resources that came to mind. So Dan's written several times about nonprofit board service. So we encourage you to read his articles. Blue Avocado is a great resource. They used to be called Board Cafe, something
Well, Board
like that.
Cafe is the kind of the sub section, I think, of Blue Avocado, where it's just board issues.
It's just board issues, and they're actually very entertaining. They dish out some interesting stories too. It's kind of,
you'll definitely get a few good laughs when you
absolutely.
I would subscribe to it if you can.
Board Source, Foundation Center, and here's the link to the United Way project I was talking about. Here are ways you can contact us. Dan has a blog called The Good Steward, and he writes about fundraising issues, danblakemore.org, and you can follow Dan on Twitter as well. I don't have a blog, but that's okay.
Well, you have I hear there's a website, but
no, it's not. But occasionally I'm on Twitter, but in any case, yes, but we're resources for you. So now we'd love to get to some of these questions that we have here. So someone writes in that they work in the nonprofit field, but on program side, program grant management, not in finance, fundraising, or PR. It seems like those are the specific skills that boards are looking for. Are boards looking for program experts and not just advertising it? So I wouldn't count yourself short here. First of all, so I'm going to tell a quick story. With my project management committee, we're working on a fundraising project for our grantee. And we have a number of folks on the committee who have marketing backgrounds, finance backgrounds, who've never done any fundraising, and they were a little worried about being able to participate in this program, in this project. And I said to them, everybody has valuable skills when it comes to fundraising. If you have a marketing background, you already know more than I do about an effective way to use promotional materials, for instance, how to position yourself, how to position an organization in order to get more engagement, more attention. So I would say find an organization that's exciting to you, or a cause that's exciting to you. And I imagine you have skills that would be valuable to them in some capacity. So, if you are interested in developing those fundraising skills, there are some classes you could take. You can the Foundation Center actually is a great resource.
Mm-hmm.
They provide a lot of free education in that area, and then it's just about practice. So, but I'm sure you have a great network that you can reach out to. Nonprofits are interested in building out their networks. So don't count yourself short.
I can just say in my day job at International House, our programs committee, while some of the people on that committee are more likely some of the finance types, but it's really also been a great help to us to have people with kind of critical skills and connections in the areas where we operate programs, which are primarily leadership development and cross-cultural exchange and understanding for the residents who live in our community. So I would definitely do not count yourself out, and I would say if you need fundraising help or anything, please be in touch. I'm happy to help.
Our next question, this is actually really interesting and definitely
all you.
Definitely an issue that comes up for folks. So the question is, can you address how to manage the power dynamic of being employed by a grant maker and reaching out to an organization as a potential board member? So I'm not sure. Well, there will always be power issues in these conversations. I think the real issue here is the conflict of interest issue. At least that's how I see it. And I think as long as you're clear about if you're interested in serving on a board, you're serving on a board as an individual. You're not there to represent the foundation. And as long as you are transparent about where you're coming from and who you work for and why you're there, and you make your conflict of interest known in advance, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, many grant makers serve on nonprofit boards, and your insight as a grant maker working for a grant maker is really valuable to a nonprofit organization. But the nonprofit organization should know that you're not a checkbook, that you can't go to the well, and and that you're there as an individual. So I hope that helps. Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
I would also, I would keep your eyes open just because Rasan, the fearless leader here at EPIP, and Chris Chu, our director at YNPN, have been doing probably in the last year or so some things around the power dynamics of those relationships between the grant makers and nonprofit professionals. So I would also check YNPN and EPIP's sites for recent blog posts about that, and just keep your eyes open because it is a conversation that needs to keep happening in our sector, because we have to acknowledge that those power dynamics exist, but also make sure we are working for the betterment of the sector, by virtue of addressing those and making sure we're communicating openly and honestly.
Yeah, they have their beans and cornbread series going on. So if you go to the YNPN site or the EPIP site and type in beans and cornbread, you should be able to pull up some of those blog posts. But yeah, power dynamics is a really important issue, and one that we can talk about forever and may never be able to solve. But it's important to be upfront about it. Absolutely.
True.
So someone was asking about recording. We are recording. We can't promise that we'll have a great video, but we are recording the webinar, and we do hope to have it up on the blog in a couple of days. So next question: do you submit a resume to a nonprofit? If so, to whom? An executive director. So that's an interesting question. So basically, this is a conversation about how to approach a nonprofit about wanting to serve on their board. So Dan, what would you advise?
I would try to find out first if how does the board really manage board recruitment? I mean, like YNPN National, every year we have what we hope is a very transparent process where people are allowed to apply. We kind of try to push it out to our network so that we're getting, because for us it's important to have people with experience working in our chapters around the country, but also have people who may not have the chapter experience but may have the skills that we're currently seeking, kind of based on where the organization sees itself. So I would, if you were really interested in that, the executive director is one person to talk to. If you end up either at an event or a volunteer something with a member of the board, that would be obviously another person to talk to. But I would try to have that personal contact with someone first before submitting a resume, because assuming your nominating committee of an organization is reasonably a fine-tuned machine. They should kind of be keeping their eyes open at all times, even when they're not necessarily in the heat of a full-on recruitment process. But I think there's definitely value, obviously, in reaching out to those people if that is really something that you're interested in.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely making that personal connection first is really important, and then finding out what their requirements are. A lot of times, I think when we're actually doing, we've been involved in some board recruitment for a while, and we have an online application, I believe. I could be wrong. It's been a while. But yeah, so we, sure, so submitting a resume is definitely helpful, but I think more importantly, it would be a personal letter indicating what it is about the organization that really resonates with you, and how you can enhance the board and the direction that the organization is going in. So it kind of similar questions that you might get in a job interview. Yeah, how can you make a difference? Slides will be available, absolutely. We are definitely going to get that to you. I know that we flew through some of those extra resources, so for sure that will be available. So another question, I'm currently serving on a board, but the board is extremely disorganized and ineffective. That sounds familiar to me. What are your tips for creating a better board experience? Well, that could be another webinar, actually.
That's about 3 webinars. Just pick one strategy for each one, and we can be here for years.
So I'm actually also in a master's program for organizational change management. So the first thing that I'm thinking about is, because we basically look at situations like this and try and figure out, why is it disorganized and ineffective? And I would start by asking all the board members, I would have a discussion about vision and values. Mm-hmm. Make sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to the vision and the type of culture that they want within the board. And that would be the first step to a much larger process, I would believe.
I would also make sure, I would touch base with either whoever your primary contact was, either the board member that brought you on, or if that was the executive director. Because I imagine that it sounds like this may have been a bit of a surprise to you. And obviously every board truly is different. They're all snowflakes. However, there are really some basic similarities between so many of them. But I would really try to get a feel for that person's perspective. Do they really see that things are ineffective? Do they think things are disorganized? Because that would be a very key. You'd be able to at least have a touchstone to be able to say, am I the only one that really sees that this is a mess, or is everyone just so used to operating in this manner that it's second nature to them? I think that would be helpful just to get a little bit of perspective on the situation.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And for the person who sent us this question, if you want to reach out to us afterwards for a little more insight, feel free to. So Next question. Most of the nonprofits in my network are grantees or prospective grantees of the foundation where I work, but the foundation has a policy against staff serving on grantee boards. Do you have any advice? Well, I guess if they have a policy, then those organizations are probably out for you. But if there is an issue area that is really resonating with you, perhaps those grantees might be able to make some suggestions. So let's say you're really well. I mean, I have a lot of ideas around this because all of a sudden my brain's working. But no, so let's say it's it's adult literacy is your issue area, and your organization funds. Is it Literacy Partners? They're like the big. So they're off. They're out. But maybe having a conversation with them about some of their other partners that your foundation's not funding, maybe that's a way to get it to be introduced. So I think as long as you're clear with everyone about your interest in serving and why you can't serve for a particular organization, but you're really dedicated to the cause, I think you'll find that folks out there will be really helpful. Yeah, as long as you're clear about your intentions.
Well, and also keep your eyes open that if there is an organization that is a grantee of your foundation, that just you love the work, if this policy didn't exist, you would be chair of the board, running the fundraising events, doing all of these things. Find out, is there an advisory board you can sit on that will get you around your organization's policy against being on a full-on board, but will still allow you to be able to be engaged in the work, but also be as transparent as you can. Obviously, as Emily said, that you are not a check, but you are more than the cash you have access to by virtue of working at your foundation. But yeah, if it really is something that moves you in this work, then also consider kind of ways to get slightly around that policy if you can.
Yeah, and as I was thinking about what I said earlier, I another resource came to mind for those of you out there who love the arts. There's the Arts and Business Council of New York. They also have a great, and I'm sorry, that's for people in New York. I'm very New York centric, so my apologies. But in other communities, I'm sure there are organizations like that match up folks in the business sector with nonprofits who need that kind of guidance and support. Yeah. So, and community foundations too might be very helpful and of value. So there are lots of resources out there. The trick is you may have to be a little creative about finding the right place. So we're just about out of time. So I want to thank Dan for his wonderful participation in our webinar today. I mean, Dan is a great resource, so definitely follow him on Twitter and read his blog. I want to thank everybody for their great questions, and look out for the slides and the recording soon. And we hope to see you at the next EPIP webinar in 2 weeks and the JAG Unity Summit in June. Please, please, please register. I've been working really hard with Michael on the programming, and so we want to see everybody there. So great. Have a great day, and serve. Go forth and serve.